The Washington Post just published a remarkable op-ed on this day defending progressive Democrats and attacking the Democratic Party establishment, sort of. The opinion column was by Perry Bacon, a longtime reporter there. It's titled, "Why Progressive Democrats Are Losing Ground." Bacon writes, "The ascendance of more left-wing politicians and policies within the Democratic Party may have peaked, with real potential that some progressive advances will be stalled." Bacon refers to basically 4 different areas: economic policy, like through the stimulus, social safety net, expanding Medicare and Medicaid, addressing disparities and discrimination, particularly in law enforcement and police, and also electoral politics. Bacon notes that big problems emerged in each of these areas last year, and that the centrist Democrats then blamed the left. Specifically, there was a surge in murder rates in New York City. The centrist mayor of New York City, the new mayor, blamed a sort of soft on crime effort, but he said by progressives, and saying that police reform was somehow to blame. Inflation, which went up, which was being blamed, of course, on spending. The Build Back Better legislation failed. Some centrist Democrats said it was because progressives were demanding too much. And then, of course, there were the election races and gubernatorial races where some Democrats lost, and you had consultants like James Carville who were blaming progressives for hurting the Democratic brand. Well, Bacon writes, however, these arguments were oversimplifications, and in some cases they were outright wrong. More than that, real world events were in fact validating the left's arguments. Child poverty plummeted when the federal government simply gave families money directly through tax credits and the stimulus, the kind of big government policy the left has urged. The political struggles of Biden and McAuliffe in Virginia showed, as the left has argued, that voters won't be satisfied with a do-little Democratic Party, even if it is fairly moderate ideologically and focused on wooing white swing voters. The murder rate surged, even as police spending either stayed the same or increased, bolstering the progressive argument that reducing crime will take more comprehensive strategies than just relying on law enforcement. Bacon goes on and says, but despite all of that, the centrist arguments gained traction. That's partly because the mainstream media, the wealthy, and Biden himself are skeptical of progressives and inclined to take the side of centrist Democrats in intra-party rights. Wait a second, did the Washington Post just say that the wealthy take the side of centrist Democrats and that Joe Biden does as well, and that they're skeptical of progressives? Look out for Perry Bacon, hopefully he will not disappear. Anyway, he continues, he says, because these anti-left arguments have become conventional wisdom in Democratic circles, they are resulting in policy and electoral defeats for the party's left wing. Biden started downplaying police reform while he and other Democrats leaned into pro-police rhetoric and funding increases. Most of BBB has been shelved. The Federal Reserve, with the encouragement of many centrist Democrats, is taking aggressive steps to rein in inflation that are likely to reduce wages and increase unemployment. Now, Bacon does include some criticism of progressives, and this is interesting. He writes, left-wing Democrats are struggling in part because they don't have a formal leadership structure or political strategy. And Bacon says that trouble is brewing for progressives because if the Democratic Party led by Joe Biden gets killed in the midterm elections, Joe Biden and the centrist Democrats will blame the left wing in the party and say it's their fault that they ruined the Democratic brand. But Bacon says all is not lost for progressives. He concludes with, quote, while more centrist Democrats have greater power and money, many of the party's most compelling ideas and figures come from its left wing. The left's arguments that the party's political strategy is outdated have been validated by Biden's struggles. This was in the Washington Post, remarkable.
Yeah, so it is really damning that we're doing a breaking news story on the Washington Post, actually printing a progressive point of view. And we're startled by it. Like, I mean, and the hilarious thing is, of course, the right wing has called mainstream media liberal media for the last 40, 50 years. And they've totally internalized, oh yeah, we're liberal. No, you're not anywhere near liberal. That's why when there's actually a left-wing points made that are based on facts, absolute indisputable facts, it's like shocking that it has appeared in a mainstream media outlet like the Washington Post. Okay, so in terms of Perry Bacon's conclusions, there's a couple of things that I don't fully agree with. I think he's a little bit too pessimistic about progressive chances, and he's right that we're going to get blamed for everything no matter what happens. But that doesn't mean that we're down and out. But we definitely need a comeback, that's for sure. And certainly in Washington, that is indisputable. And then he says at the end that triangulation is a thing of the past. Yeah, I mean, it should be, but it isn't. I mean, Joe Biden is triangulation 101. And if you talk to not just Democratic leadership, but almost anyone within the Democratic Party structure in Washington, every one of those fools would tell you that triangulation is still the right idea. They would still tell you that there should be somewhere between Republicans and Democrats, and they should kiss the ass of Republicans. And just today on the contraception vote, Nancy Pelosi mentioned her Republican friends 2 or 3 times. They voted against contraception, and she's still calling them my Republican friends. And she beseeched them to vote for the bill. Of course, almost none of them did. So, but what I love about the article is facts that were in there. So Joe Biden is not a progressive. I mean, just really, really simple facts. We fought tooth and nail against him in the primary because he has been, you can call it moderate, conservative, corporate, establishment Democrat his whole life. No one in the world thinks that he's progressive, but they're like, but in Washington, every other piece, and this is an opinion column, the ones that are supposed to be objective will write it as if, well, Biden's obviously having troubles because he went too far left and the Democrats became too progressive. You're like, Joe Biden who just celebrated having lunches with Strom Thurmond and how much he used to love that, right? Get too far left on which planet? No, that they're not even trying, to be honest, outside of Perry Bacon. And so, and just simple things like they say, he said the left got blamed for Terry McAuliffe's loss, but Terry McAuliffe is the most establishment Democrat you'll ever find. That's just a fact. There's no question about that fact. And yet in Washington, they live in an alternate reality, not the Trump one, that there's a second alternate reality where deeply unpopular establishment Democrats are only losing because they listen to progressives. Well, one last one, David. As you pointed out, the only real progressive policy that they implemented was a child tax credit within the COVID relief bill. And that was the most popular policy they passed by a lot. And that's also in the polling. So the one time they went left, the country loved it. So what did they do? They immediately cut it off and went back to right wing, and they lost all of their popularity.
And Cenk, I got to ask you about the bit of criticism of progressives that Perry Bacon put in. He said that again, left-wing Democrats are struggling in part because they don't have a formal leadership structure or political strategy. What do you make of that?
That is overwhelmingly true. That is the truest thing ever written. And so here I'm telling you as a criticism of progressives. And so normally leaders would do planning, they would do infrastructure, et cetera. And Bernie Sanders has been very good about endorsing other progressives and putting a spotlight on them and trying to help them in his own way. But whether it's him or Elizabeth Warren or others, they have not been very good about building infrastructure. It's kind of every person for themselves. Oftentimes progressives don't even endorse other progressives in primaries because they're afraid of being yelled at by other Democrats in Washington. Look, I've got a plan, but I think I'm the only one, and that is really damning. A random talk show host shouldn't be the only person on the progressive side with a coherent plan to regain power.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.